Okay. So hello, I'm here with Ed Lasak today, and we're going to have a conversation about specific kinds of marketing and sort of narrowed down to the service industry, to sort of independent professional business service. And so we're calling this independent consulting marketing, but it could be used for a variety of professionals, small CPAs, attorneys, et cetera. So, works well in consulting. It works well in a lot of professional and business support areas. So we're going to talk about this as a kind of a 1, 2, 3. How do I march through it? The steps are very similar to the marketing planning cycle, which we've highlighted in a couple of our other shows. So that might be a good reference, and we'll tag it on the end of this so that you can see that if you like. But that is complicated in the sense that it's built for just any business to be able to go through and do all the steps of marketing, including taking a look at customers and competition and pricing, et cetera. This is a little simpler. It's not easy to do, but it's a simpler marketing process than going through the whole thing. But it still means doing your homework, going through a positioning stage, going through an execution stage where you come up with content and you do the communications, and then you do the feedback. So we're going to go through most of those. We won't talk too much about feedback. The other shows that we've done on feedback would be pretty much identical. A lot of times, consultants in businesses of this type may have 5 or 6 pretty large clients, and it's not as though they're going to do a lot of extensive customer evaluation and analysis, and so that may or may not be that important for small consultancies. But there are thousands and thousands and thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of businesses that fall into this category, where they're just trying to get out and go sell some of their knowledge or a service that they provide, and they don't have a big budget. They don't have the ability to go hire folks, and they can't find people. Ed, you were suggesting that it's hard to find people that can do some of these things, and it is hard to find people who can do more than 2 or 3 of these steps. So it just ends up being complicated. But that being said, so what I wanted to kind of talk about as we get started is a little bit about the way I did it. Not that it's perfect, but it was successful. And I started doing this in 1989. I was doing what I was doing before, so I was very, very comfortable having conversations with prospects about what I did, which was consulting, mostly merchandising consulting for fashion retail stores. So it was very focused. I later expanded into marketing and moved out of retail business, but it's the same basic concepts, and merchandising does have some similarities with marketing. So that's kind of how I got started. And the way you do that is you go talk to your prospects, and your prospects in that particular industry happen to be retail stores. So you'd walk up to the retail store and you'd walk in, and likely in the smaller stores you could find an owner or you can find a manager, and they're willing to have a conversation a little more readily maybe than, say, a manufacturer would. So I cold called them and I talked to them, and I did it over and over and over again. I had done that for 3 years when I was covering Oklahoma, Kansas, and Arkansas for a large national consulting firm. And that's really how I learned the craft of the consulting craft after I had been in the retail business for 15 years. And so the interesting thing is that they only gave lip service to selling. They did have a marketing arm that was mostly a pretty nice newspaper that was published on a monthly basis. We did a lot of good articles that were great content for retailers. We had a large subscription base. And that was primarily our marketing. And then we went to shows, as you know, fashion type shows, trade events, and we also we had 250 field guys, and so they would each do one or two talks at at an appropriate venue each year. So that was our marketing effort. But the vast majority of real business was done because people would walk into the store and get them interested and then do a pitch. So here's kind of what I suggest on how to start with a marketing and a selling approach. And it's marketing, but an awful lot of what we're going to talk about is really selling. And so this is kind of the way that I built this when and began to develop my business when I left the national firm and started on my own. First thing I did is I joined the chamber, the local chamber. Then I had been a Rotarian for a long time, and I think I was already a Rotarian, so I was in Rotary. My wife was in 4 or 5 groups in our hometown. And then I joined, this happens to be a church school board. And then what these lines represent are how it developed, because these were all contacts. So whenever you'd meet somebody, they'd say, "What do you do?" And then you'd give them a 2-minute or a 10-second really kind of description, and then you'd find out what they're in and see if you had something in common. So what happened with the chamber is I became a committee chair, and as a committee chair, I spent more time with certain people, and I actually developed a prospect or two from that. I also developed some advocates, people who knew who I was, what I was doing, was interested enough to have an extended conversation, so that if it came up that somebody needed something that I was doing, then they would advocate for me. And they drove several people to the prospect area. Rotary, I got to know people very well over a long period of time because you're having lunch with them every week. And so I would always try and sit in a different place and make sure I met everybody. We'd talk about what we do. I'd ask them what they do, and I'd identify them as whether or not they were prospects or not. Those who might have been, say, a school principal were not in my database, but I'd wanted them to know what I did. They probably didn't have an interest in what I did, but I wanted them to know. And then there were those who were independent business people those were my prospects. And so I developed some business from that. A little bit from Molly's groups. Those are extended, normally parties that her groups would have, where the men would show up and business women would be there. So that was another way. So as a committee chair and with these advocates, I was able to kind of extend the reach for my contacts. Now today, we have another aspect, and under advocates, I probably should have even listed, LinkedIn is very much filled with prospects and advocates in contacts. So I would put LinkedIn in this category for people who would advocate for you once they know who you are. And that's a very important online advocate today. When I was on the board, I was on the board for 15 years, and there were 23 board members. I was the chairman for 5 years, got to know a lot of people fairly well. It turns out that most of these people were leaders in their church or leaders in their organization. And so I developed some close relationships with those folks. And I haven't put them all in here, but there are a few others as well. But the point is that all of these connections end up driving people finally over to the client box here. So what happened from the prospects is, and I didn't draw a line from prospects to clients, I meant to, but many of these prospects, of course, became clients. The second thing I did is the cold calling, which I've already mentioned. And when I went into marketing consulting and sort of refashioned my business slowly as I had fewer and fewer retail clients and more just general business clients and manufacturers, well, of all types, really. I refashioned my materials. I started talking differently about what I did. And I found that people resonated whenever I talked about marketing and or building business, because everybody wants to grow their business. And the biggest thing that people have trouble with is growing their business. They can manufacture their item. They can do their service. If they're a plumber, they know their craft and their trade, and they can do that. But what they don't know is, how do I go get more business? Well, so I did the cold calling there as well, and that was painful. I used to literally, I had a client in downtown Los Angeles. I had a client in the Valley, and I used to try to get out and see them. And then on my way driving all the way back to the Inland Empire, I would stop at prospects all the way back, and I would always plan on certain stops all the way back so I could stop in and see people. But I found it to be very difficult to get in around the middle of the 90s. People were getting beat up by too many visitors, too many salespeople calling. I was just another one. And I didn't really have that connection that I had with my prospect group. And so while I did get some clients that way, it became tougher and tougher. And then, of course, the other big area is, referrals. And I put Red Fusion in the referral category because Burgess Management, my practice was really, while we were joined at the hip in a lot of ways, I was really doing a different function than Red Fusion did. Red Fusion did not do strategic planning. It did very little advice. People wanted to pay Red Fusion for service. They didn't want to pay for advice. They thought they knew what they wanted. Some did, most didn't. But our people were able to help them reasonably well to get where they needed to go. And so I didn't get as much business from Red Fusion as you might expect. So, Red Fusion had built and had relationships with 500 small businesses. And I would say over a period of 22 years, I got one great client and maybe 3 or 4 minor clients that didn't last very long. So that was a very low referral for me, is having them come to Red Fusion. It was kind of interesting. That's not what I thought would happen. I thought our, we did graphics, we did direct mail, we did advertising, and of course we built lots of websites and did a lot of online marketing. We were one of the very first in the country doing online marketing, and I really thought that would be a great referral and get people really coordinated and start helping them do strategic planning, and it just didn't happen. So that was kind of a surprise and disappointing. However, clients are good referrals. So that's kind of the way that went, Ed. And we've talked a little bit about groups. You are deeply connected and have an awful lot of followers on LinkedIn and I'm sure on other social media platforms, and tons of friends, and you've been on every committee under the sun. So you've gone through this and you know what that is. And so the connections that you have are the same connections that you can use actually to continue to do marketing. So number one, let's talk about how do you really do it and follow a step by step. And number one is you got to get your story right. This is under the general category of positioning. And so every small business has to have a niche, and they all need to be able to explain what they do pretty fast and differentiate themselves in a very short time. So number one, you got to get your story right. And in your case, dealing as a CFO for hire is a wonderful moniker. It kind of tells a story. People know generally if they're buyers of financial services and accounting services, they know what a CFO is supposed to be doing, or they think they do. And so you're way far ahead already. So you need to get the story right for the niche market. That means that as you look at your best prospects, you might tweak that just a little bit. You might, you want to do it quickly, but you still want to add a differentiator, which would be your experience, specialty, or credentials. And in your case, you need to have credentials, which you do have. And you might also differentiate yourself by focusing on a couple of different industries or sizes of companies, or even a smaller niche. Like if you're going to do like a part-time thing, that would be something to get into your elevator statement. You might say something like, we're a CFO for hire. We work at the upper end as an executive, but most small companies only need several hours a month, and so we would be the folks that we direct, your full charge accountant or your accounting department or something along that line, so that you further get that story right and you get it really nailed down. Now the reason is because as we just talked about, you're in all of these groups here. You're trying to get people to know more than that about you, become advocates. But in all of the things that you're doing, you don't have much time to really talk about what you are, unless at Rotary you're having lunch, somebody does have an interest, and then they ask you the next question. And so then they can learn more about you. But for the most part, they're going to handle about 10 to 30 seconds of an explanation of what you're doing. And then they're going to want to do the same to you and see if you're interested in their stuff. And so, that's fine. That's kind of the way conversations get started. And so that's why it's important to have that down and have it be second nature. Then number two, then you create some content. So once you know what you're going to say, then you determine what additional content you're going to put around that. And so you need to have a few details. Website is obvious, but in addition to that, actually, and I actually missed it. I should have had emails on that list. That's on the later ones, but email on that list. It might be a brochure, but 2 or 3 other items that are included on the content. And of course, the content includes things like a general statement, and you kind of start at the top, just like you would write an article. The general statement is this is our elevator speech, who we are, here's our specialty and how we do it. We focus on customers of a certain type, size, color, or age, or whatever that might be, and the services that we provide are. And then you list maybe 3 or 4 of your primary services, and then you go to the next step, which is write a paragraph about each service. And then the next step would be start writing support articles that support each of the pieces of that paragraph. So that's really the creating the content. Creating the content can be bought out, but in most cases, the individual kind of has to lay out at least the outline and the original ideas. Doesn't mean it can't be edited, can't be changed. People can suggest it. Good marketing people might be able to help it pop just a little bit, but it's not like writing an ad where you're trying to catch people's eyeballs, and you have a fraction of a second to do it. This is really the people who care about your content are the ones who have the wherewithal to pick it up or to look your website up. They actually have an interest. So now they're ready for more content. And creating that content, of course, we're not talking about the high levels of creativity that can be done. And of course, there are people that can be hired to do that at some later time. But to start with, you just sit down and you have to kind of gut through it and develop it the best you can on your own. Make sure you've got good English people going through the language and making sure the structure is good. I know you don't have a problem with that, Ed. You're an excellent writer. But there are others who really do, and you can't afford to have a mistake like a spelling error or punctuation error.
Is step number 2 primarily the website?
Well, it shouldn't be primarily the website, except for it's the natural receptacle to start with. Mm-hmm. And so that you want to create a little bit like a virtual book where you start at the top with the basic stuff, and you put you put your explanation of what you do, who you are, who your market is, and then you list your services. And then you go to services, and now you've got, say, 3 services. You got 3 pages to write on your services, and then you go to services and you write those pages out. And then in addition, down the road, you take those and you write. You're going to write case studies, white papers, articles that support those different pieces, each time getting more and more detailed in talking about one single subject. So
does this include a CV?
A CV would be fine about you. Yeah. And so under the, who is Ed Lasak? It's like, here's a CV, that's what we do. However, I also like a statement that is a little bit more general, that can be read fairly quickly because, well, in your case, your CV is pretty long, and you've been doing a lot of things for a lot of years. So people tend not to read a whole CV, but they'll read bullets that are, say, 1 sentence or 2 sentences long that would be more specific. Yeah, and they could include things like, had experience as a publisher of a major newspaper, was responsible for all operations, et cetera, have worked with clients like this industry, that industry, manufacturing, service, the areas that you've done the work in. And then you say, something like my, 27 years of experience qualifies me to do X, that kind of stuff. So just a general, that kind of like how you like to work and the things that you do in a general way, just in case they don't read the CV. Because a lot of times, if the first one is done, because remember, the goal here is just to convince them that you are authentic and you have the industry expertise that you say you do. And once they get that, you're done. Sometimes people may be skeptical. People like myself. I tend to be more skeptical and don't, because I'm, I guess, in marketing for so many years, I'm skeptical of what people say. And so I want to see the support documents that would, sort of support / prove that what they say lines up with the rest of their materials and their experience, perhaps even references, perhaps even testimonials.
Well, it also becomes more challenging for a person like me because you got to have a business card.
Yeah.
So you have to figure out the design, and I'm not really good on design. And the better it's designed, the better it looks. I think it adds a lot to your content. And then your logo. And so there's all these little things that need to be done, and done by somebody who really doesn't have the experience in doing it. It's tough.
Well, yeah, no, but see, things like that are perfect things to sub out. Those are, there are lots of great designers that you can tell them what you're about and what you do. They would take a look at your name, the name of your business, determine if there are any imagery that can go along with that. You're building content in words, partially so that you can hire somebody that can understand what you do. You don't have to spend 3 or 4 or 5 hours explaining them. And then they can say, oh, yeah, well, let me come up with some ideas. I think I can do something like that. And, or you might say, I want something that looks sort of numerical, or I like kind of architectural drawing blueprint like ideas, or um, I don't want it to be numbers. I want it to seem more friendly than that, as they might use more people and less, say, geometric numbers. Or you might say, I want it to be really contemporary, so that the business looks a lot younger than I am, or whatever you feel about. And then let them help you move forward to something that would work, for both of you, something you like, but can be done and developed by a professional who is good at doing that. Now, hiring that person might not get you what you want. You might even have to go to another designer or even another one. But if you go in with the idea that you just want to say, look, I don't want you to, I want to see concepts on what kind of a logo you would develop for this business. But I'm, and then we'll talk about it, because I don't know what I want. I want to see concepts. And you may be able to come up with something very fast, or you may find that somebody just doesn't understand it all. And then you can say you're done with that. And you can move on to, say, another designer.
Well, I think the one thing in particular that you provide that a lot of other people don't is that you were pretty on the spot when it came to identifying what are the services that I do that are more marketable than others.
Yeah.
And I don't know where you go to get that type of advice, but you were right on it. And so now I have to redesign my website accordingly.
Right.
But
Well, you didn't ask me about the first concept, see? So,
yeah.
which I don't think there's a thing wrong with. It's just that, as we went through and utilized the structure of the marketing planning cycle. And when you get to the market side of it, you realize that the market is very, very small.
Yeah.
And that's all we ran into as an issue, is that there's a very small market with a very tough marketing life cycle. So that's all that was wrong with that. The content you've done has been excellent. I think the look and feel is just fine, and so it was only just the idea that your elevator support caused people to ask more, or your elevator speech caused people to either roll their eyes or they were afraid to ask more,
Yeah.
because they just did not understand it, or they were so far away from it. They might understand what, say, exit planning is, say, as a businessman, but they're going, well, I'm 10 years away from that, and I really don't want to have a conversation.
That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
When they're 80 years old, that's kind of, a lot of times that's their spiel. They're not interested.
Yeah.
Kind of not interested until it actually happens, and they need
Right.
to move.
And so it doesn't mean it can't be successful. It just means that you have to cast a really broad net.
Yeah.
And probably a little broader than you could do based on the relationships sort of diagram that I drew. And keep in mind now, I mean, we talked about this in other shows too, but you've got this tension between relationship transactions and completely transactional transactions. So business done on a relationship, and businesses that are just transaction oriented, where they don't have any relationship with anybody. Well, this business is probably one of the most relationship driven markets that there are. And so you have to develop the relationships in order to be able to close the business. And therefore creating relationships with this small number of people is difficult to do, because they're few and far between, and it's hard to find them. And as I mentioned, you may know people, but you haven't seen them for 10 years, and all of a sudden they're selling their business and they didn't think to call you.
Yeah.
That's the problem. But you didn't do anything wrong at all, and you've got great content, of which becomes still a great part you know, a CFO for hire. That's something that includes the whole idea of driving value in the business. And the 8 business drivers are perfect for a CFO to implement and to drive. But it's the relationship of the CFO that opens the door eventually for that client or for a friend of that particular client. So, you know, it's not wasted at all. It's not wasted. So I also want to say that one of the smartest things I ever heard about starting a new business or changing directions was that you should never let the business card be the reason that you haven't started calling on people. Who was it? It's a real famous sales strategist, and I can't remember his name right now. But you know, he tells a story of a friend of his who's decided to go start his own business, and he said, "So how's it going?" And he said, "Well, I haven't started yet." "Well, what are you waiting for?" he says. And the guy says, "Well, I don't have my business cards." And he said, "No, that's just an excuse. You take your old business cards, you walk in and you start having a conversation and you say, 'I'm just starting this business and I'm going to put my new number on the back of the card.' That's how you do it. Don't wait." So I think there's something to that. You know, sometimes you can not, you can come up with an excuse for not doing it simply because you think you don't have the tools. And what he's saying is, no, don't let that get in your way, because that's just an excuse. Now, being that I was in marketing and we were selling design consultations and so forth, and helping people find designers and that sort of stuff when my practice was young, I did feel like I needed to have a card that spoke a certain way and created a certain image. Fortunately, I was able to design it myself, and you know, I went through maybe 1 or 2 versions, but I just designed them and printed them out and cut them up myself by hand and started using them. So, you know, that didn't hold me up. But I always remember thinking to myself, I can't let this design thing hold me up. I got to get it done, and I got to get out and do it. So number 3, understand your market. And we've talked about this ad infinitum, and so you understand that well. But this is where you know, just reiterating for the audience that in the consulting business or the service business that has business products and services, it's a relationship business, and it's important to develop those relationships, and that's part of the market. And number 2, referrals are a very big part of this. So it's important to do excellent work so that people are wowed, and whenever they have an opportunity to pass your name on, they can do that, and they will do that. Not as much as you'd like. But what it does is, if you do all of those things right, that when you're looking for business on a periodic basis, you can ask them for business and say, "Hey, by the way, you know, maybe every 6 months, have you ever run into any other business people that might use some of my services? I'm looking for just a little bit more business." So that's kind of the market. And then of course the rest of understanding, you know, the market is to, you know the businesses and the sizes of the businesses, and what kind of businesses are responding to you, what kinds of businesses seem not to respond to you. And then of course, academically, there's a lot you can learn about certain markets simply by looking it up on the internet. Number 4 is to try and meet your future leads. And this is really where we talk about, back to the original comments in the diagram, and that is, you know, you got to spend every single waking hour that you're not doing billings going to meetings where your business prospects are, joining organizations where your business prospects are, handing out your card and picking up their card for the ones especially that might be in your particular market, and then doing speaking engagements, whether it would be nowadays on Zoom, which is so much easier, and then participating in all kinds of things. So I think that was the one thing that that I tried to do. And of course, when I was young and starving, and it took me 3 solid years to get back to the salary that I was making, as an employee. um, if I didn't have business, I was selling, and if I was not selling or going to meetings, etc. And if I wasn't selling, I was billing. So, and normally the way that works is during the daylight hours, I was out developing relationships, going to meetings, and I did less and less of it, but I still dropped in on people, tried to meet certain kinds of people with certain kinds of businesses where I found them, just everything I could think of. And then a lot of times I would do my billable work at night. And then of course not the meetings, but I would do it by night, and then I'd do sales by day. So and it's a kind of thing where when you start out, it's 100% sales, and a few weeks into it, you get one client, and then that's only 99% sales, and eventually you're down to 30-40% sales. But the idea is you fill your time up. So those are how you find and develop your leads. Then communication. Now, this is the not the content side of it, but this is the structured side of it. And of course, you want to have business cards, and we talked about that. You want to, whenever you meet someone, you want to make sure they're greeted on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn being a new tool. So nowadays, whenever I get a new business card from somebody that I think would make a good contact, not necessarily for business, but for MicroGiants, for a business contact, maybe a consultant, people who are interested in business, or people who run businesses, or say they're professors. People like that, I want to know who they are. I want them to know who I am. And so I would always, and still always, go on, try to do it the same day or the next day, and send them a request for a link and a little greeting in LinkedIn to build up my list. Boy, it makes a difference. I mean, I've got people on my LinkedIn that go back 10 years or more, when LinkedIn was absolutely brand new, back when Twitter was new and LinkedIn was new. And some of the people that I met 10 years ago, I still see their face, and I still see things they do and kind of follow what they're doing. I communicate once in a while. If they're doing something that's interesting to me, I might say hi, might let them know what I'm doing, update it. But I try to keep that dialogue going a little bit. And the people who are really good at it really spend time doing this. I would say they spend time every single day on LinkedIn. Then you make sure that same prospect is added to your prospect list. Now, that's either in a simple CRM, customer relationship management program, or it's a database of some sort. It can be Excel, but Excel is not quite as versatile in the long run. You might even be that you can now manage some of them inside a email program. So some of those have pretty decent CRMs, and so you want to get them in. And then if they look like there's somebody that, say, meets your A and B category, top ones, you may want to even greet them with a quick little email, and just say, hey, added you onto my LinkedIn, and enjoyed meeting you, etc. And then you know the story, but go ahead and just do that. And that's an everyday kind of thing. Two, you want to do introduction emails. That would be, which what I just mentioned, I was already onto, but that's where you formally write them a little note and give them a little information about who you are, and so forth. And one thing that I kind of like is that if you've got your content going, is just to say, hey, I thought you'd be interested in my monthly newsletter, and it's on X, Y, and Z. Uh, these are topics that are interesting to people in your position. And if you're interested, great, don't do anything. And if you don't want to be on it, just go ahead and hit the unsubscribe button right now and make it really big so that it's easy to do, and they just have to do one click. And then what they basically said is, no, I'm really not interested. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have an opportunity to uh, watch and follow them on LinkedIn. That's where you'd go back, but they'd fall to like a C prospect at that point if they unsubscribe. Most people, after meeting you and with a nice introduction, are not going to instantly get rid of you if they're prospects. Now, if they're not and they take themselves off, great, no problem. So it would suggest that your little newsletter would be about, in your case, CFO tips and tricks. It doesn't have to be long or big. It doesn't have to be a real newsletter format. It can be a paragraph, a little bit like how Inland Empire US does it. It's just a little paragraph, a teaser that you click on, and then it takes you to the website, which is where you're going to put most of your content. And it's also the same place where you would put a link for the 3 consulting amigos, and that would just then allow them to take a look at a particular show that we've done. And we've done so many shows. You could be having you could go through the 8 drivers, and once a month just highlight one of them, and you've already got the content ready, and you just write it up, make it fresh, a little bit more timely with what's going on with events, and you've got your stuff to make a pretty interesting newsletter, something you could do yourself, but you can also just write it up and hand that over to somebody who manages your email and have them handle the whole thing. So that's one of the things you can easily form out. And then, of course, when you do the content, you also want to, your monthly newsletter, you want to promote that on social media so that the newsletter would be in email format, but you take a hard copy, a digital copy, but you would take that and you would also put it as, say, a blog on your website, and then you would promote it on social media with a link to that month's articles with a button to sign up for regular subscription. And that's another way to gather leads and to get people into your funnel. And then, of course, phone calls to old acquaintances, not too often, but maybe twice a year, just to say hi. And at the same time, people are interested in what you're doing. And so you talk to them about it. And you just say, well, here's what I'm doing. And depending on who they are, you can ask a little bit about their advice. You can update on their career. Have they moved on to other places? Are they business owners now or still? What kind of business? How's their business doing? And you can get to know them a little bit better. Of course, you already know them, but those contacts, and you have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, those contacts get stale and old if you don't keep them going. So then we get to, well, okay, what kinds of communication do you really do? And so this is where I just sort of summarized, and these are really media, if you will. First of all, copy. And as I mentioned, you're a good copywriter. You know your topic, expertly. You're an excellent writer, and so you just simply write about everything that is done. And we should be doing a better job writing about our own shows. We're not quite up on that. And secondarily, videos, which we have been doing a great job on, that are all, of course, subject oriented. And then don't forget to utilize the links to those videos on a more frequent basis than just in social media, say, but utilize those subject by subject. So if you're having a conversation with someone, or you think they're interested in a driver number 6, for instance, or CFO principle number 3. Then you can just go through our catalog and pick a video and say, here's more on this subject, and you might find that interesting. And at the same time, write white papers around the subjects that are really heavy duty CFO types of subjects, but built for the owner or the decision maker. So it could be things like tips you did not know your CFO would do, or things like things that CFOs try to get away with, or the things that you should be doing, but you're not because you don't have a highly qualified CFO working for your company. Those kinds of topics that would catch somebody's eye, a slight slap in the face, with solutions and understanding that they're not going to know everything there is to know about it, because that's a professional position that very few business owners and presidents really know and understand what that job is deeply about. And then, of course, finally, and it is last, for the presentation to a client for actual business, now you do need to have a pamphlet, which can be in the form of a couple page handout, and or a presentation hard copy or on a computer, for and I should have said, instead of presentation for presentations, I should have said a PowerPoint for presentations. And then that just gives you something formal. And as that's developed, and you keep it fairly short, but with some open questions so that you can have a longer discussion when you're through it, then that can be left behind as a hard copy as well. So those are really the steps, and it's not terribly involved in this kind of an industry. It's not nearly as involved as in some other, like consumer businesses, consumer product businesses, that sort of thing. But it's also not that easy to do, because it requires an incredible amount of time and effort on the part of the person putting the business together to get edit, to monitor the content, and that ends up being a never changing problem, and in a constant drag on time. So that's the basics. Did I cover it okay, or?
Yeah, you did a great job of it, and it's. I guess I get caught up in the technology, like on the emails. How do I write an article? What do I do with it? So I want to start writing some articles. What do I do with the article?
Well, the first thing you do is you post it on your website.
Okay.
And so you just set it up in your blog, and you do an article, and you pick a topic that you're interested in, and you go through. You try and keep it narrow and focused. Don't do big broad ones.
Yeah, I narrow and focus, and
Yeah.
a nice photo goes along with it too.
Yeah, and so you do that, and you go ahead and you post it, and then the next thing to do is when you send out your monthly e-newsletter or email, you put the opening paragraph, the teaser, in your email, and then you have the link that goes to your website, so that the email is relatively short. You don't put the whole article in the email, and partially because you want these people getting back to your website.
Is the technology easy enough now to post your own articles to your website?
Pretty much. It's not that difficult to do
tool.
blogs. Yeah, posting the blog is almost as easy as doing something on Word. You write it on Word, and then you copy and you paste it from Word right into the blog.
Well, you can.
Yeah.
And can you have a design for your blog?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You can. It's all formatted. You can have it. You would be formatted so that they all look the same. There are a couple little extra things you can do, like you want to categorize your blogs by subject.
Mhm.
so that you can assign a subject to it.
Yeah.
Then what happens is that and you've seen them where, on the right or the left side, you'll have 4 or 5 or 6 major subjects, and there might be 3 or 4 blogs in each one of those subjects. So that if somebody wants to take a look at, say, some specialized issue on a financial statement, and you've done a piece on that, then you would have finance or financial statements, and then you might have 4 or 5 pieces under there. They'd click on that, and then they'd pick the one that seems to be what it is that their issue is. So that's how you get people involved in your content, answering questions. And of course, you want to try and write these from the perspective not of here, not as a how-to, but more a why-to, because you want them to call you to do the how, or to do the work. You don't really want to give them a step-by-step answer on how to reconcile their account. That's really not finance; it's more accounting. But you know,
The
some of
article.
the stuff that you do, an owner only needs to do it one time, and they can't remember how to do it the second time anyway. And it makes so much sense to call you up and say, I've got an issue here. I'm not sure how to treat this particular deal, or my balance sheet looks weird, and I don't understand, why my numbers seem off, or my depreciation isn't matching, or whatever it might be. Um, or say fiduciary responsibilities, that kind of thing. So you don't want to tell all, you want to tell enough so that they know you know.
So you put the blog on your website, and then you also have a newsletter that goes out to emails.
Yeah.
And what's an easy way of storing emails, so you can have a
Well, you can do it in I think MailChimp, and the other one besides MailChimp.
constant contact?
Yeah, Constant Contact. I think Constant Contact now uh, has has the equivalent of a simple CRM built into it.
Okay.
And so you can manage it that way pretty easily, and put people on certain lists. Now, of course, you may lose control there, because if somebody unsubscribes, Constant Contact will not let you ever send them an email again.
Oh,
So I mean, they are serious about the ICANN rules, and they're serious about that. It's not bad marketing policy either. If people unsubscribe, it's because they're no longer interested, and they're not a prospect anyway. So you
yeah.
kind of don't care. So why waste time on them?
Oh, I don't have a problem with that at all.
Yeah. But it's nice because you can go on there, and with just a little bit of learning, you can manage the emails, and you could write your newsletter effectively, which is going to be 3 or 4 subjects, or I should say 4 or 5 subjects, that each have a short paragraph to describe them, and each one of them, or most of them, will have a link going to, say, a full topic, or the full article. Some of them will have a video, so you'll say, we did a Three Consulting Amigos video on this subject, and there's a much more in-depth conversation from experts that you can look at here. So, to have a little email that has 3 or 4 or 5 subjects that are interesting, a little bit diverse, and then have each one of them branch out to the full content makes a pretty nice presentation. And you see, now that you have so much content to refer to, you can really do this pretty fast. Now, the writing, yeah, you may not have tons of that stuff done, but you know how to do that. You can easily do that. So
Yeah.
it's just a matter now of putting some words together and scheduling these things out and sticking to a schedule.
So just start writing and start posting, and then how do I get people to look at it?
Well, because there are several ways. Number one is that you post it on your website and the search engines are looking at that.
Okay.
So if you want to use words that are specific to what you're doing, and unique if possible. And so what it does is it looks at groupings of words and phrases. And if somebody asks for um, oh, audited balance sheet for the automotive industry, and that's the name of your article, and you have listed that, in the top paragraph, just like the way you write for, 12th grade English class. And then your chances are reasonably high that if they're in your geography, if they kind of have the right profile, if they've looked at other articles similar to that, that you have a chance of them finding you.
Hmm.
And so if they put a long string in that matches your sentence, you've got a real good chance of being on the first page. So it's only about, let's see, we haven't looked at the numbers for a while, but it's only, it's a relatively big piece, have short, choppy phrases. But it's not half, it's less than that. And the rest are what they call long tail keywords. So these are real remote and infrequent questions. And an excellent question might be, what are the principles that I would use to increase the value of my business? Well, now there's a chance, and if they live in, say, Southern California, there's a pretty good chance that you could get on the first page with an article that's what that was about. So number one, it is writing good content, putting it in the format that Google likes. So number two is your newsletter will constantly refer back to your website. And so you're going to get traffic that way. Three is to do social media on each one of your articles and explain what it is, and so that people have an opportunity to read the full, the full story, or to get the rest of the story on your website. They don't know they're going to your website, but they're going to click on it and they're going to end up on your website. So, and then number four is what we're doing with our MicroGiants channel that has the 3 Consulting Amigos programming. And so they're ready to go. And we need to do a better job of making it possible for them to see all of our websites on each one of those. So, so those are the ways. Also referrals from the MicroGiants website, referrals from Inland Empire US for articles you might write for that. And so those are the ways that you get it to go. And the interesting thing is that frequency is how it works. So I did all of the numbers for our manufacturing client. And maybe I'll look those up and show them to you. But the HubSpot's research showed that if you did one posting a month, you would get X number of amount of new business. And I'm going to throw out, it was like 5% more traffic. If you did 2, it was like 15% more traffic. If you did 4, it was like 110% more traffic. So Google is actually watching the frequency of your posts. And when you get them done in a steady, consistent way, it begins to pay attention to you. Our manufacturing client has done so well because for 3 solid years, we never went 2 weeks without having an article. Now, we haven't been nearly that good lately, but we've already hit the threshold for that particular industry. In the plastics industry, they're very unsophisticated on their websites. They do not believe that this works. They don't know anything about the inbound marketing aspects of attracting people to the website. And so we're just killing it. We're not the very best in the country by any stretch of the imagination, but our traffic is up double or so from what it was 3 years ago. And our interest tickets are way up. And we're getting, as you know, we're getting lots of new people asking questions about plastics manufacturing. And that's all because there's no magic about it. There was a lot of hard work writing articles and trying to come up with subjects that were pertinent, et cetera. And that's where that comes from. And that's how you can drive traffic. Give you an example. When we launched the MicroGiants nonprofit, it was just a name. When I selected the name, I looked at small giants, big littles, macro giants, every combination of words that I could think of. So I had about 8 or 10 that I thought would be suitable. I did not settle on the one that I liked. What I did is I did searches, domain searches, to find out how many domains there were with that name. And so I picked MicroGiants because there was only one MicroGiants.com that had any kind of ranking on the website. So when we started that website, it was not being found in search at all. You had to put the .biz on it in order to find it. Now you can type in MicroGiants and we're on the first page. Why? It's because while I haven't done a terrific job in posting content, I have posted additional content, more so than the other MicroGiants. And there will be a day, because of the incredible amount of the number of links I have back to the MicroGiants video channel, and because we're driving more traffic to it, there will be a day when we'll be number one. That's the goal. The goal is to be number one under MicroGiants so that people can find us automatically. And that can happen if you're diligent about the inbound traffic and the search engine optimization. They call it search engine optimization, but it's nothing more than writing pertinent content in clear ways. It's just kind of simple. But of course, the SEO experts want you to think that it's magic, and it's not really magic. There are a few interesting little things like how you select a name and that sort of thing that is important. You don't want to pick a name that is not competitor, that is completely not unique. In other words, it's very repetitive. Collaboration is, someone that we know who has collaboration as part of their name. That's a horrible name because there are 90,000 kinds of collaboration, and he is never going to get people who wander on his site, and that's going to be tough because the brand is poorly built. So, hope I answered that question.
Very good. Thank you for taking the time. Let's see if I can start with baby